The rights of small business owners were violated in a way that was not constitutional. The government has no right to take away your private property. Then you are due just compensation. The Fed printing trillions of dollars, that in itself was going to drive inflation. Then you had this disruption of the labor force, and that came in many different flavors. So I see a very tough road for small businesses ahead. And again, this is all government mandated. You need to have a bigger cash cushion. You need to have that flexibility because at this point, there are new risks that we never imagined would happen.
Hi, Dr. David Phelps here. I'm proud to announce the release of my newest book, Inflation, The Silent Retirement Killer. I started my real estate investing portfolio back in 1980, during a time when inflation was running at 14.8% and the federal funds rate was at a high of 20%. This after a decade of hyperinflation in our country, along with a very anemic economy called stagflation. Now look where we are today. We have hyperinflation again, moving that direction. We have interest rates going up, possibly triggering a recession. Could be back to the 80s. I know how to navigate these times. I've done it. I built my whole portfolio during times of a lot of volatility. In my book, I've packed it full of information about how fiat currency can undermine the hard work and the wealth that you tried to create. You've got to do things differently to protect that wealth going forward and the wealth generation you hope to pass on to your heirs. You can download a digital copy of my book for free at inflationbook.com. That's inflationbook.com. Author Vanita Van Caspel once wrote, "Inflation takes from the ignorant and gives to the well-informed." You want to be well-informed in this case. This is what I call the great wealth transfer. Be sure you're on the receiving side, not the giving side. Download a free copy of my book at inflationbook.com. Yeah, we went from too big to fail to too small to matter. Your words in the book, right? I mean, that's exactly what we're looking at. And today, particularly going through COVID and the last 2 years with the government saying, well, here's small business owner, here's some PPP loans, have at it. Here's some breadcrumbs, right? Well, and by the way, we're gonna give extra unemployment to your workers, so they probably not gonna want to come back to work. So good luck with that, right? So now we have this wage and labor hike. We have the Great Resignation, as we're calling it today, and then we have inflation. So here again, I am the small business owner, and I'm trying to find staff and people to help run my business, and I've got still all these odds against me today. This is again a creation of the overreaction of funneling money again to the crony elitists in breadcrumbs. But you talk about PPP loans being like eminent domain compensation, which is what the government's supposed to do when they take away your right to create a livelihood through your business. Usually that's with property. We'll take your property, so we'll pay you something to compensate. But this really didn't happen, did it?
No, I mean, I hate lawsuits and the whole idea of suing. It's just not sort of who I am. But in this particular case, the rights of small business owners were violated in a way that was not constitutional. The government has no right to take away your private property. And if they do, again, Fifth Amendment, like you said, eminent domain, then you are due just compensation. So saying, we're going to only close down certain businesses, you cannot use your property and is quote unquote for the good of society. They were owed a lot more than what was given to small businesses in terms of PPP. So just from that factor alone, there should be additional compensation. And the amount of money, I mean, we've spent more than $6 trillion on COVID relief, and not even $1 trillion of that has gone to small businesses, when frankly, they could have spent about $1 trillion or a little bit more up front, kept people employed at those small businesses, kept those small businesses afloat, and gotten people back to work after a few months when they figured out a risk mitigation strategy. So this was all entirely avoidable. But again, it doesn't benefit those who are wealthy and well-connected, so they frankly don't really care about it. And that is the tragedy. And then the series of decisions, as you alluded to, that were made is what has caused all of this long tail effect. And unfortunately, the book had to go to publication before I could get all of these things in there. But if I were to write a follow-up, or if I'd had a few more months, like you said, it was, and some of the stuff is alluded to, but we didn't see sort of the effects. So the Fed printing trillions of dollars and the trillions of dollars in stimulus, that in itself was going to drive inflation. It was very obvious from day one, just in terms of the increase of the money supply. Then you had, as you said, this disruption of the labor force, and that came in many different flavors. It was the paying people to stay home instead of paying them to stay on the payroll and giving them, kind of the flexibility, in some cases more money. So a lot of people shifted out of jobs and said, I'm just not going to go back to that. It was the uncertainty of school closures. If you were a parent and you had a child that was in school and they kept closing down these schools and you had to stay home and take care of your child, you can't commit to going and starting a new job if you think that there's a possibility that in 2 or 3 weeks that everything could be closed down again. Like, who wants to do that? So there was a lot of uncertainty. And then the increase in asset prices in terms of home values and 401ks pushed 3 million plus baby boomers to retire early from the workforce. The restrictions on visas, because you didn't want other people to come in and bring COVID into the country, meant that not only are we down in terms of legal immigrants, in terms of kind of where we were pre-COVID, but based on the growth trajectory, we're actually about 2 million behind the projection of where we would have been had all these decisions not been made. And then you had a lot of people who decided to become day traders and crypto traders, from all of these decisions. And I don't think, here's the sad part. They keep talking about, oh, well, this is all going to go back to normal. These baby boomers aren't coming back. They're not going to put 2 million immigrants, back anytime soon. People who've, left to do something else, it's going to take a while before they perhaps give up on that. So I don't see where the labor is going to get restored, in earnest anytime soon. And that also adds to inflation, because if you have to pay workers more just to attract anybody, and you also don't have enough workers, which means you can't produce as many goods and services, and there's more dollars chasing fewer goods and services, all of those things also drive inflation. So I see a very tough road for small businesses ahead. And again, this is all government mandated. So, small businesses are very resilient. You wouldn't be an entrepreneur if you weren't a problem solver and somebody who, is willing to work through these things. But it just adds more risk to the equation in terms of what you're putting out and what you're getting back in terms of your own wealth creation opportunity.
Yeah, great insights, Carol. Because I know you are such an advocate for small business, because you've obviously been advocating for many, many years, and this is your love for free market capitalism, which is, we're seeing that go by the wayside with centralized planning. I'm curious about other ideas, tips you can give to small businesses. You mentioned collaboration, which I think that's huge. I'm glad you said that. Collaboration, not looking at the landscape as being all your competition. No, you've got to learn to collaborate. In terms of where we are in the marketplace today, asset bubbles, Wall Street, real estate, housing, et cetera, and the inflationary factors that you've already alluded to, and the labor situation. Is this a time when small business, if they feel like they have capacity to increase size or expand, is this a time they should do that? I mean, I know it's going to be different for everybody. I know it's hard to generalize, but I'm saying should we stay nimble? Because that's where small business has the advantage over large business. We can be nimble and better, I think, if we keep margins in place and watch overhead and keep a tight consumer communication, know our consumers, our clients, patients, where they may be. But speak to that a little bit, because I know that you, with your consulting and helping raise capital, that's got to be part of what you do, is help them decide, do I expand now with low interest rates, or what am I getting into?
Yeah, so I think that the first thing is, if you haven't learned this in the last couple of years, I'm going to tell it to you now, but I think most of you probably figured it out. You need to have a bigger cash cushion than you I mean, you always needed one, and small businesses notoriously don't have one, but you need to have that flexibility, because at this point, there are new risks that we never imagined would happen. I mean, nobody would have ever said, hey, the government's just going to come and shut you down at will and keep everybody else around you open. Like, nobody guessed that. Was not on anybody's radar. I did not hear that from anyone. And that presents a really big new risk factor. So you need to have that scenario. The debt question is a challenge, because debt is still very cheap and is probably going to start increasing in price. With inflation, the real cost of debt is negative. So if you have that investment that can pay off, you can definitely take advantage of that debt in a way that, the same way that the big guys are. The challenges, and I'm going to be, really frank about this, is as a small business owner, you're probably personally on the hook for that. So there's definitely more risk. And in terms of the growth, even though you think you may be able to grow, there may be these stumbling blocks in terms of getting enough workers or getting some of the supplies in the supply chain. And you really need to take that into account when you're running the numbers to see if you have enough margin of error for that to be worthwhile. So I think for those who are well positioned and are in, potentially an area, I mean, there are going to be a lot of your competitors that are going out of business. So you may have the opportunity to pick up clients, or maybe there's a merger opportunity where there's more strength and scale that makes sense for. But you need to weigh those risks and rewards. And obviously it's very different for every small business owner, depending on, if they have co-investors, if they have kids, if they have a family, what their financial situation is, and, the specific issues that relate to labor and supply chain on where they are. So those are the things that I would weigh against each other.
If you enjoyed watching or learning from this video, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel for more content. If you have a question about any of my content or this specific video, just please leave a comment down below. And as always, stay focused on your freedom. I'll see you next time.